Hey guys, so this is going to be the third and final part of the discussion on improving your jazz rhythm and time. So today what I want to talk about is time feel, which for me is kind of hard to clearly define, but by talking about all these things today, I think that all these things kind of have to do with it, and if you try to practice these types of things, it should improve your time feel. And this is sort of different from the discussion in the last video with syncopation. See, syncopation, that's the type of thing, like if you just immediately make a conscious effort to start syncopating more, you should start to feel more satisfied with like the types of lines that are coming out when you're playing. But it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how it's feeling and everything. So that's what the time feel is, what we're going to be talking about today. Doesn't matter if what you're playing is syncopated or not. You should ideally want to play things so that they sound perfectly or flawlessly, so it has a good feel, good dynamics, good touch, everything is hitting in the right places. So that's just something that you need to work on to develop. So today's story time, I'd say this happened probably beginning of this year, February, March, something like that. I had been meeting up here and there with this one, another jazz bass player, also a great bass player who recently got his master's in music, and went to him to shed some tunes one day. Didn't think I played particularly well again, and at the end of it, I didn't ask for any advice, but I actually always appreciate when someone gives me some advice, because this is what I love, and I'm always trying to get better at it. So I'm always open to hear something from a musician, especially if I respect, So, like, I'm always open to hearing advice from a musician, especially if I respect them. So, at the end of this session, he just said, hey man, you should work on your time. And I responded by saying, like, yeah, I know that it's something to the weakness of mine. I'm well aware of it, which is funny because I'm always preaching it, but I definitely struggle with it sometimes. So, the next thing he asked me is, like, have you ever played drums before? So I responded by saying, like, I've sat down in a kit many times before, I could keep a basic beat, I understand how it works and all that, but have I ever, like, actually practiced the drums with any degree of consistency? Well, I had not. So he said to me, he's like, you should try practicing some drums. And what he said next was very profound for me. He basically said, of all the members in a band, when the drummer messes up, it's the most obvious more than anything else. And I went home and I thought about this, and it was really eye-opening to me because, we all think, like, we all want to do more complex things a lot of times, but if you look at even something as simple as a basic rock beat, just eighth notes on the hi-hat, maybe the kick drums just going like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and the snare just on 2 and 4. Once you get past the very basic coordination to do that on the drum kit, if I was to say, like, can you play this beat, you can probably be like, yeah, like, that's easy. But then if I was to ask, like, can you do it for 5 to 10 minutes in a row without stopping and have it be pretty much perfect the whole way through, and you can play with good feel, good dynamics, everything is steady, there's no, like, extraneous or, like, obvious, like, dynamic issues, like you hit something louder than it needs to be at some point, can you do it like that? And that you might have a different answer for. And that's going to lead me to one of the main points of what I want to talk about here today. Just like in yesterday's video when I said sometimes it could literally be a matter of one word that will completely change the way you think about something. So to me, when we're talking about rhythmic practice, that word is endurance. So one of the main things I want to tell you today is, in my opinion, when you're working on your rhythm or your time, you have to understand that you have to treat that practice like endurance exercises, okay? Because that's the only way to do it over and over again and actually have a good feel with it. Now, I do want to talk about this in relationship to the drums, but I also want to talk about this in relationship to comping. Let me just first talk about it with the drums first, and then we'll go to comping and then back to drumming. So the thing is, I mentioned in the first video that I had gotten the Mike Longo products, some of them, and they're really good. I don't want to actually talk too much about what he actually teaches because, he sells these things. But, the main beat, let me bring the djembe out here, is basically this 12/8 beat. I'll talk about this more in a little bit, but basically what it is okay, and it's a polyrhythmic type of meter. That's one of the main things he wants you to understand with conventional jazz music, is that it's, especially if you look at jazz tunes that are in 4/4, he wants you to understand that it's not really 4/4, it's actually 12/8, and there's 3 different other rhythms that are happening within it. I can count all 3 of them with the same pattern. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they all exist within that 12/8 polyrhythmic meter. Okay? Now, when I practice that, because I'll treat that like an endurance exercise, because that's exactly my point. Because first of all, I picked up those materials about a year ago, and I did not have the djembe yet. And while it got my hands coordinated to do the pattern properly, it did not really teach me what I needed to know. I'll explain that more in a little bit. But the way I practice it, regardless, I want to do it non-stop for, say, 10 minutes without stopping, or to various recordings. I don't like to do this with a metronome because the metronome is supplying too much time, and it doesn't really force you to take responsibility for the time. And I don't like to do it without any metronome at all or anything, because then you don't really have anything to check yourself against, to make sure that you are kind of staying in time. So I like to practice the djembe with recordings, a lot of jazz recordings, with different types of time signatures and things like that. And like I said, really what I mean when you treat this stuff like endurance exercises, if you do this like this, playing it it's not enough to be like, oh yeah, I played this beat correctly for 10 seconds in a row, so I know how to do this. You don't, because if you do this non-stop, this will rub your blind spots in your face very, very quickly, and it'll force you to have to constantly be listening to the recording, to the other musicians, because if you don't, you'll notice you're not going to be able to stay in time if you've never done this stuff before, and for it to be smooth and fluent. The most likely tendency will probably be to rush, but you can also drag. The touch just might not feel good. That's one of the main reasons also why, I'll talk more about this in a bit, why practicing this with the djembe is extremely important, because it'll give you the right sense of accents and touch, the way the beat's supposed to be felt. Without that, if you just did it on a tabletop, you're not going to be getting that, and that really is imperative to really having this stuff help you. We'll get back to that in a little bit. But basically, yeah, like when you do this with a recording, it'll show you really quickly, like, are you really like able to keep a repeating pattern like this, like in time without messing up, okay? And it's really true what my friend said. If the drummer messes up, it's more obvious than anything, because on paper it looks really easy, because they're just doing these very simple, repetitive, rhythmic figures over and over again. So it's like once you get it, you think like, how hard is that? But that's exactly the point, because the brain recognizes these simple, repetitive figures. So any divergence from the continuity of that is going to be picked up immediately. So you have to be able to keep something simple like that and be able to be steady and smooth. If you can't be steady and smooth with something like that, how are you going to do it with something more complex, So that's the drums. But obviously, I'm a guitar player. How do I want to apply this to guitar? So the most obvious way is with rhythmic practice or comping practice. And funny thing is, before all this happened, not like I never practiced my comping before. Obviously I have. But I will say that it's nothing like the way I practice it now. Now I treat rhythmic or comping practice almost religiously. It's one of the most consistent parts of my practice, and not only has it improved my comping directly, but it's absolutely improved my rhythm overall. It's helped me be able to feel the syncopation more, all these different things. And you want to treat it the exact same way. So just like I was saying with the drums, it's like you can take something as simple as a Charleston rhythm, starting on any eighth note of the meter or of the measure, you might look at that rhythm and even say, I ask, can you play this rhythm, apply it to a tune, especially one that you're familiar with, so that you know the changes. And you might look at it, and because the rhythm in and of itself is not complicated or complex, you might be like, oh yeah, that's easy, I could do that no problem. But can you really do it, like I said, for 5-10 minutes in a row, over and over again, without stopping, and have the feel be perfect, and everything just feel exactly the way you want, and nothing is off without any mistakes? It's not as easy as you might think if you've never done it before. So I could demonstrate one of them. Now, what I like to do, I'll probably put a link for this video in the description, but there's an older video on YouTube that's great for this. It's this other guy who puts jazz guitar lesson videos up, and he made a whole video on like jazz guitar comping rhythms. And I like to also do some other additional, slightly more advanced rhythms as well, but I'll do something where I'll just pick a tune and I'll run through that tune over and over again with all these different rhythms, and I'll try to do it without stopping, like one going into the other. I'll play like a whole chorus with the first rhythm and then the next one and so on. And when I practice this, I've been doing it lately with the metronome on just one time per measure. I've been enjoying doing it on beat 2, something like this. Like if I was like 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to play to it in a second, but because back to what I was saying before, you want to practice with the metronome, but ideally speaking, because the whole point of this is you should internally be able to take as much responsibility for the time as possible. To be perfect with that would be meaning to do it without any metronome at all. But you would have to have 100% perfect time to do that. I still like to have the metronome giving me some sort of data, so every time it clicks, I can see if what I'm playing is lining up in accordance to where the click is continuously falling. Okay? But doing it, like you might want to start with it on 2 and 4, but 2 and 4 is still a lot of information, and it's easy to lean on it and not have to take responsibility for the time yourself. So basically what that means is your time may not be that good if you just stop with 2 and 4. So the less and less the metronome is giving you, the better. So I'll show you a Charleston rhythm, but starting on beat 3. So it's the downbeat of 3 and then the and of 4, which is like a syncopated version of 1. And maybe I'll apply it to the form of All the Things You Are, since that's what we've been working on in this series here. So basically something like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that was okay. I haven't really played much at all today, but when I practice these type of rhythmic things, I like to warm up to this stuff so that it's always usually much better by the time I'm done with the rhythmic practice than when I'd started. And this is still a pretty fast tempo. It's at 50 beats per minute, but if that's once per measure, it's 200 beats per minute, the quarter note. You absolutely should start slow with this, and even if I did like something, maybe like a blues, let's say I did like 120 beats per minute, the quarter note. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I'll do like a different rhythm. Maybe I'll do the and of 3 and the and of 4. So that would be something like this. If I did say a blues in B flat. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. So by doing it slowly, it's easier to learn to really hear those syncopations and trust me, I mean, I'm a broken record here saying this over and over again, but doing this stuff over and over again is how you will learn to hear what sounds right and to really make those syncopations feel good. And it's not just nailing the syncopations, it's the dynamics, it's having steady control over what you're doing, you know, not trying to be too loud or having these accidental, like, loud hits or things falling in slightly wrong places. So this is how you want to practice this stuff, okay, over and over again. Trust me, not only will it get you better at comping and playing these particular rhythms, when you go to play your solos, 100% guarantee your rhythm will be better if you practice this stuff with consistency, okay? Now, back to some things about the drums. Like I was saying, you know, first of all, that particular pattern of this conventional jazz pattern, it's a 12/8 pattern. And that's, first of all, training your ear to hear the eighth notes in that more so triplet feel, which is what swing is. So that's one thing. Now, it's also good because when I practice this, you can practice this to different jazz recordings and different meters. So it doesn't matter if the song is a 4/4, if it's in 3/4 or 6/8, you can apply this pattern to all those because all those meters are within this 112/8 meter. So, and another good thing about this too is because, you know, sometimes people talk about, you know, the faster the music is, the slower you count. Well, it's good for that as well because if, say you have like a really fast, like 4/4, like bebop tune, normally this pattern, like what you're basically playing is eighth note triplets, triplet, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 2, 3. Those could be thought of as eighth note triplets, but if you just understand your math, if you have a super fast bebop song, you could still play the same tempo or same pattern, but basically at halftime, and it'll be much easier to keep your place. So if you had something, like basically you'd be thinking of it in like a quarter note triplet subdivision. So if you had a tempo, it was like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's really good to practice this sort of same pattern with different recordings at different tempos because you should be able to feel this pattern in all of those and know how to break it up. You can also do the opposite. So if you had a ballad, you can almost play like double time. So if the tempo is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes by doing that, you're creating more subdivisions within each beat so that it's easier to keep your place. And that's the next thing that I want to get to because this is going to talk more about why the djembe specifically can really improve your awareness of beat because, you know, the beat is super important to music. Like, we understand time signatures, we know how to play in time, but it's not just enough to play in time like that. Whatever style of music you're playing, you really want to know how to lock into that particular beat. You know, with this beat, I mean, the accents are still the quarter notes, basically, of 4/4 time, but there's still other things happening. This is happening all throughout, okay? And this is one thing that the djembe, practicing with this, has taught me, is like, it really teaches you to feel like the rhythmic skeleton, like in your bones, and feeling that with the combination of accents on top of it, because it's really interesting. Like, if you look at the djembe specifically, there's only 4 main sounds the djembe can make. It can either have an unaccented rim shot, a more accented rim shot, that probably just clipped the audio there, or you can have the shot in the middle, whatever it's called, or more accented version, you know. And it's funny, if you look at that pattern, literally all it's doing is right, left, over and over again in a triplet feel. But if you didn't know it was triplets, if this wasn't against a meter, this would just sound like you're going right, left, over and over again. So this is why the concept of beat is really important, because this is literally what I'm doing, but only when you give it the different timbres and combinations of accents and unaccents does the beat actually start to come alive. So it's really important to understand exactly where the accents are of a particular groove or style. Now, this is a conventional, like, swing jazz pattern, you know, but for whatever style of music you're playing, you have to know the rhythms of that style of music to be able to play it correctly. You know, another common one is obviously like the clave, like something like. Okay, if you're gonna play something in that style, it's not like you only are playing things exactly when those hits are happening, but everything that you play should sort of be in line with that particular groove. And you should be keeping that groove in your head, just like, you know, in terms of like when I said with syncopation, make that in the forefront of your brain. If you're going to be playing something with a clave feel, put that clave in the forefront of your mind, because you want to be able to lock into it. I'm pretty sure in Spanish, the word clave, I'm pretty sure literally means like key. I think llaves, because that's what I learned. Llaves is keys. And it's like basically like that's the key to locking into that music. But this goes for any style of music, okay? And also in terms of feeling these beats, you know, and this is drumming 101, I'm sure, but, you know, there's a reason why drummers learn rudiments on a practice pad or a snare drum and then apply it to their whole instrument. And I really think an important thing to take from that is specific combinations of right and left. That stuff is also very important to sort of defining the groove of a particular rhythm. And I really believe in this sort of duality, whether it's right, left, or however you want to see it, with one thing and another, that creates a sense of a rhythmic pattern. You know, for example, like I basically wrote this one rhythm out that I came up with a few days ago, and before I wrote it out without any sort of right-left pattern in mind, but then I looked at it and I tried to figure out what is the most logical sort of combination of right-left with this rhythmic pattern that would give it the proper groove. And it's basically this. I'll apply it to the djembe. This is the rhythm I came up with. It was basically like... Now here, I'm separating between that hit and that, but even if I did this all rim shots, same right-left pattern, you can still get the proper sense of how that rhythm is supposed to feel. And once you understand this, it doesn't just have to be a drumming thing. You can apply this to any instrument you want. So I could apply this to guitar. Maybe the right-left thing could be literally two different strings. It can literally be just two notes. But practicing or playing some sort of musical thing with this rhythmic concept of going back and forth between these right-lefts with the right patterns. Just like a drummer applies these rudiments to his entire kit, you can apply these rudiments to your instrument as well if you know how to do it. So that's why when you're studying different rhythmic patterns, it's really a good idea to understand like how you would stick that basically in a combination of right-left, because then you can apply that stuff to anything that you want. So anyway, I think that's all the main things that I wanted to say today. Like I said in the beginning, this one had a lot of different points that I wanted to talk about, but hopefully you can kind of see how they all kind of relate together, of basically working on your rhythm in a way so that you really nail your time feel, and also becoming more aware of like the beat that is actually happening within the particular music that you're playing. But underneath that beat, like you have the beats are like your accents, but underneath that beat it's like the rhythmic skeleton, whether it's the eighth note triplets or it can be 16th notes. Like if it was like a more straight pattern, like on the djembe it might be 16th notes, like that's more of a straight pattern, but the I'm kind of swinging it a little bit, but like that has to be in your bones, you know, and the more you work on this, the easier it will become and the more it will be in your bones, so that you have such a strong awareness of beat. And we all fluctuate with this. That's why when my time feels good, I'm like super connected to the beat and I'm there. But when I'm not, you know, maybe I'm not warmed up, maybe I haven't played, maybe it's just not a good day, you know, you'll see that your timing will be more skittish and all over the place. And again, going back to the drums, play that drum pattern in time with the recording, and that will show you better than anything else, are you actually locked in. So by working on this stuff consistently, you should improve, and it should help your playing tremendously. So I think that's about it for this whole little series. That wraps it up. you know, there's obviously lots of other things to study with rhythm, but all the information I gave you here, I think that this is a lot of good stuff that can help get you started and put you along the right path for improving your rhythm and your time. And like I said in the first video, all this information is out there, but I really don't think it's consolidated well for a lot of musicians. There's not like one source that really tells you all these things packaged into one. So the fact that I did this in this little video mini-series, I think could be really beneficial. So this way, if you ever feel like your rhythm is slipping or needs to get better again, you can always come back and watch these things again, just to kind of give you a good overall reminder of maybe where your head needs to be at least in my opinion. But if you have any questions, you can obviously shoot them my way, and I'd love to hear people's responses. But other than that, I guess enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.